Welcome to Raptors Today. Paul Jones alongside Sherman Hamilton. You'll hear from Amy Audibert, Savannah Hamilton, and a special guest, Ashley Docking, a little bit later in the show. But Sherm, got to talk about the Raptors bouncing back after losing a couple of stinkers in Charlotte and Atlanta. They take the Nets, a big blowout, and then a 1-point win. Full capacity. It was nice to hear the chants of defense going down the stretch. And sure, the invisible sixth man, you and I talk about it all the time. It is a help. It does help fuel the energy of the team.
Well, it does. And the invisible sixth man was a visible sixth man for the Raptors when they played against Brooklyn. So it was important. And we know this. Players talk about it, and it's real. It's palpable, and it's something that feeds into their energy on the floor. And you think about the Raptors and playing in front of an empty building at home for so long, and then going on the road and seeing all these buildings packed, that has impact on you. And to come home and get a chance to play in front of the fans, and the fans were hungry to be there as well.
Yeah.
There's a certain energy that goes along with that. You think about down the stretch in this game, it was a close game. You know, we talk about Thad Young hitting that three. The crowd erupts for that three. That's not energy that has to come from your bench and the staff on the bench. And also, you know, Scotty Barnes with a big block late in this game, and his pass, his no-look pass, all of those plays just become more emphatic based on the crowd being there, and the crowd sensing at times during the game where the Raptors were kind of losing hold of the game. When Brooklyn went up by double digits, the Raptor fans got into it to try and implore their team. So throughout the course of the game, the Raptors can feel the energy from the fans. They hear the cheers, they hear the motivation from the fans, and that's important. And I really think that having fans in the building impacts how they play on the floor. And it was great to see them benefit from that against the Brooklyn Nets.
Sherm, I agree. I mean, Goran Dragic made his return in that game, the second night of the game against Brooklyn on the back-to-back. And the fans were giving him a little bit of the business. All of those little things kind of feed into the energy of the game. And I thought it was terrific just to have them back in the building. Sherm, you mentioned Scotty Barnes and a couple of the big plays. I mean, this kid just continues to amaze me. And I guess I should probably accept it now. He's been terrific since the All-Star break. 3 of 4, he's played really well, averaging 20+, shooting over 70% from the floor. You go to the All-Star game, you get that validation like, hey, yeah, I'm an All-Star. I belong here. I'm seeing all these great players, and I'm amongst them. He's been awesome. I look at his form. He set the tone Monday night in Brooklyn with a steal right away. We saw the stats about making 10 straight shots. No rookie's done that since Derrick Rose back in 2009. His form has been awesome, Sherm, and he has really given the Raptors a look just with his all-round game.
Oh, no question about it. And you talk about that first game on Monday night against the Brooklyn Nets. I tell you what, he came out of a situation where you could argue he was the bright spot against the Charlotte Hornets based on how he played, but the team laid an egg. The next night, he was okay. Precious Achiuwa was better in Atlanta, but they still laid an egg. And to have no Fred VanVleet in the game, no OG Anunoby, key leaders on your team, and Scotty Barnes is the one that sets the tone, as you said, immediately off the jump, he gets a turnover, he's getting fouled, he's going to the free throw line, and his demeanor and his personality on the court was about business. I looked at that situation and said, this is a kid who understands, who gets it.
He gets it.
And isn't afraid of the moment. He's not afraid to take responsibility and take things by the horns and say, I'm going to do something about this. That bodes well for the future. But you talk about his numbers offensively, Jonesy, they've been phenomenal. But how about the job he's doing on the glass? How about the impact he's doing defensively in terms of switching and providing that energy on that end of the floor? He's been a leader, and you don't necessarily hear that about a rookie, but he's been doing a great job. And, you know, you're talking about a team that's trying to right some wrongs. He's been at the forefront of that charge, and he's done a great job over the last 2 games, especially against the Brooklyn Nets.
Sherm, I continue to marvel at his all-round game for a kid his age, his passing, the no-look passes, as you said, getting to the offensive glass, just having a knack for the ball. Another guy who really impressed me too, Sherman, we've talked about this. I think it seems like he's been in the league 5 years, but it's only been a year and change for Malachi Flynn. He's grown into, I honestly believe, a good young pro. If you're not ready, you get exposed when you get put into a situation that he did the last two games, standing in for Fred VanVleet. Instead, 13 assists, only 1 turnover, runs the team. He played confidently. He was definitive in his actions. And that's a guy, it's just a mark of a guy who's ready at any point to get into the ball game. And you saw his confidence grow too, Sherm.
Yeah, no question. And one thing I really enjoyed about Malachi Flynn, especially in his first season, was when he hit the floor, his facial expressions, his body language was all business. Yeah, he wasn't there to make friends. He was there to produce and play as hard as he could. And I've always appreciated that feel from Malachi. And as you talked about it, I mean, he's gone through the gamut. He's been in the rotation. He's been out of the rotation. He's got a few scrap minutes. He's played more minutes. He's gone through everything in his first year and a half. And the tough thing about it for him is that he's had to just kind of navigate it. And I love his maturity, his professionalism, and as you spoke to, his readiness. He's putting the work in. We know after games at Scotiabank Arena, he's coming back down to the floor. He's shooting after games that he doesn't even play. So everything about his approach to the game is what you love to see in a young player. And to me, based on those tenets, it's no surprise that when you see Malachi Flynn hit the floor in the absence of a Fred VanVleet, that he produces the way that he does. He's worked extremely hard. He's done a great job staying ready, and he's done a very, very good job of taking advantage over these last 2 games of his opportunities.
Welcome to RTX. We haven't done one of these in a minute, so I'm so happy to be joined alongside courtside analyst Amy Audibert, but then also Ashley Docking, a Toronto-based broadcaster. Amy, how are you doing?
I'm great. I'm hanging out in Brooklyn with the Raptors, and life is pretty grand for me anyways.
Awesome. I'm happy to hear. You've been doing some big things these days. And Ashley, how are you doing?
I'm not as good as hanging out in Brooklyn with an NBA team, but I'm all right.
I mean, listen, I see you all over my Twitter feed these days, all over my Twitter feed. So I can't wait to dive into this conversation because we are going to be talking about women in media, in sports, in society, where we currently are at. Now, I want to just open up the conversation by going to Amy first on this one, because, she had a huge role in last year's all women's broadcast that TSN put on. So, let's do some reflecting. Amy, we've seen the all women's broadcast on TSN maybe lead the way for more broadcasts to happen. ESPN did one with the Golden State Warriors game and the Utah Jazz about a month ago. What do you make of this? Do you think that we're on the right path with these all women broadcasts? Give me your open thoughts.
Yeah, so I will say this, it's crazy. We're coming up on a year of it, and I'm still get DMs once in a while from people, especially women, just saying, I think last week I got one, just how cool it was for them to see women just sit in those chairs and roles that you don't traditionally see women in. And it was actually a really good game. I say the Raptors played really good against the Denver Nuggets. I keep saying OG, shut down Jokic in the first half. Those are the things that I remember the most, but it was such a fun night. But also it was just this opportunity, again, not to go in there and take anyone's jobs and but just show that we can do it too. And I mean, you're certainly seeing it. I don't think it was a coincidence that you saw Kate Scott now in the play-by-play chair for Philadelphia, Lisa Byington with Milwaukee, because women got a platform that night. And I thought it went pretty well. And I'm still proud. I mean, it wasn't just us 5. There was a lot of people that pushed for that fought for that, and then showed up and did a great job. So it was a great evening. I'm glad that it impacted so many people, a lot that we don't even know or realize. But yeah, I mean, it was certainly exciting, and it's been nice to see other teams also give other women that platform and opportunity, even if it is for one night, just to say hey, we can do it too. And we can do it pretty good.
Yeah, I think, listen, one thing comes to mind. I don't know if you guys watch RuPaul's Drag Race, but bring back my girls, which is a catchphrase from Miss Ru, because I just don't understand how it did go more than pretty good, Amy. It was fantastic. And you guys added such a great perspective, an expert analysis, an opinion, a different lens. And so the fact that there's only been one in the last year TikTok, like, let's go. If people are really serious about change, and listen, this is a nice step, but people are really serious about change, it needs to be something that is constantly thought about, constantly pushed to the forefront when it comes to women in sports, not just something that's kind of like, yay, this was really cool for one time, which it really was, but the next step is being like, okay, how can we make this a regular basis? Okay, how can we not come for people's jobs, but how can we pull up a chair and have people sitting there and expand the broadcast, expand the production to have a better rounded, a more well-rounded view of the world demonstrated on your TV set?
Yeah, exactly. I'm so happy that you brought that up, actually, because there's kind of been a couple arguments here that I've heard from many different people, kind of stating that all women's broadcasts, like whether it's no matter who's putting it on, it could come off across as performative. However, I definitely challenge that notion, given the fact that there's still a lack of equity within these positions on a daily basis. So these all women's broadcasts are giving opportunities to see more women get a chance, get national or international air sometimes, and get hired in different markets. So I do think that they definitely serve a purpose until equity is 100% across the board, men and women working in sports. So that's kind of like my two things. So I'm happy that you brought it up. And of course, it's Women's History Month. So I also want to kind of just take stock in where we currently are at. Ashley, I'll go to you first, President. Where do you think, as a whole, with women in media, where are we at?
I think we're getting there. I think there are being steps taken and we are moving forward, but more so than in front of the camera, behind the scenes is predominantly male. So that's an issue that most of casual sports fans or just television viewers really wouldn't know about unless they're in the industry. A lot of the behind the scenes stuff is still male dominated. And so the next challenge becomes for the people in power, for the decision makers, to take stock and look at where they're getting their talent from. So to your point, Savannah, having these broadcasts that showcase very talented women on a national scale is great, because people that might not have known who they are finally get eyes on them and they're like, oh, wow, she's fantastic. This woman is amazing. So for people that are making decisions on talent that they're going to hire, what's the talent search like? Because I want Diddy making the bands. I want a wide net cast across the nation, because that's the only way that you're going to become familiar with talent that is outside your general scope. And if you're not searching far and wide, then you're really missing out on some super talented folks, women in particular in this case. And so once that changes, I think we'll see a lot more equity in a lot of those positions that aren't traditionally held by women, particularly in production.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say, when you look at the women's broadcast, all five of us have regular rotation jobs with an NBA organization or G League. And that was the point of it, right? Is that we have fit at the next level. But to your point, Ashley, it is behind the camera. And if we're just talking about the industry as a whole, the big thing, I think they are starting to happen. We're starting to see the WNBA a $75 million investment. And that's from the Arisons, that's from Baron Davis, that's from Paul Gasol. These are prominent figures on the men's side that are investing into women. You saw the US, the senior national women's soccer team just have their settlement. Steps moving forward for equal pay. It's not just the TV. We could just talk about the broadcast, but really it's just investing in women's sports as a whole. And I think when you look at viewership numbers, of course, the Olympic, the gold medal game, and those things need to happen, and they need to continue to happen so that we can start seeing women be more respected across the board. It certainly is trending in the right direction, but we're certainly not there yet.
Yeah, and something that you mentioned off air just before we hit this record button, Amy, was the verbiage that we use with women, because not everybody has $75 million just lying around to, force into women's sports. And I wish I had it, but that's not the case. So, but there is little things that we should be very cognizant of, call out and educate people on how to talk about women, about women's sports. And one thing you also mentioned before to me was, your title is a courtside analyst, not a sideline reporter. And there's something to be said about that. If you don't mind speaking on that a little bit.
Yeah, it was really important to me. Women traditionally but women do fill the sideline role on a broadcast, but it's not the only role that they can fill. And again, I talked about some of the play-by-play voices that are emerging. I'm in Brooklyn tonight. I get to see one of my favorite team analysts, Sarah Kustok, who, by the way, in Brooklyn, that's a tough market to hold. And she's award-winning in this area. And so just to continue to see women push the boundaries and what they can offer and not be put in a corner is important. But again, that's not just like us showing up to work and saying like, hey, I'm ready to do something else. That's the leadership, and that's the people upstairs that make these decisions that empower and uplift and allow us to have these opportunities. So yeah, I mean, it was really important to me when Sportsnet called and said, we'd like you to be on our team. And we kind of like talked in my vision and their vision and how I could contribute. And I'm really excited just to continue to kind of push the boundaries and see where they can go. And I've had so much support with everybody to contribute as a basketball mind. And that's been really important to me. And so I think it's really important for other women to also, you know, get their foot in the door, but then not just be happy to be there, but just continue to try to like empower, uplift, and represent all women.
I'm stealing that. I love that because I do floor side analysis for the NLL on TSN. And I do think that there are ways to integrate yourself into the broadcast in more than meaningful ways, right? We're not just there to be like, oh, he's in the back with an injury, she's in the back with an injury, we're not returning. We have valuable conversations, intel and insight. And I think that the more we show up in those roles and other roles around any broadcast, the best it's going to be for the audience. Because, and we've talked about this before, I think on this show, where it's like audiences are trained on what to expect. You might not think so, but from a marketing perspective, which is what I majored in college, the audience is trained to what they like, what they should see, and what they should expect. So the more you see women just there and it's not a big production, it's just, oh, she's on the call tonight. Cool. That becomes the norm. Then we get to have panels where it's not just women in sports talking to Ryerson University, for example. It's just people in sports. And so there are, of course, always going to be niche conversations, whether it comes to women, whether it comes to people of color, representing different spaces. But the conversation is surrounded about just the work that you do, not who you are while you do it.
Absolutely. It's funny because that ESPN All Women's broadcast game, to be quite honest, I completely forgot that it was even on that night until somebody texted me being like, are you watching the Golden State versus Jazz game? It's a really great game. I flipped it on, started watching it, mindlessly like, oh, wow, like a really great play, blah, blah, blah. I didn't even consciously take in that it was all women's because I was so locked in and engaged with like the action on the floor, the commentary, and I'm like, then I stepped, I'm like, wait a minute. It's all women. Yeah. Oh my goodness. This is so great. Like that's when you know it was so powerful and so great because it just flowed. You didn't think anything of it. So listen, we could have this conversation all day long, but our producer Jake does need us to wrap it up a little bit. So we'll definitely continue this another time, but thank you so much for joining us, guys.
Thank you so much, Savannah. And I do want to say, I think this is on behalf of Amy and I, congrats on Three Course Conversations. You are absolutely killing the game. And it's just so nice to see you succeed. And we love you for it.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Sav. We're going to hear from Nick Nurse and take a look ahead at the Raptors schedule.
The specialist thought it was nearly healed. Said it'll get better every day. I guess we're just waiting to determine he's able to play on it. And they said probably within 2 weeks it would be fully healed. So we're just trying to decide what route we're going to take there.
Well, Sherm, it's always a tough break. And I feel badly for OG. It just seems like his progress seems to get stalled by injuries that keep him out of the lineup. He's an important cog. I mean, Nick Nurse, you heard him say he might have to just play through it and tough it up and give what you can with what you have. He's so important. We talk about his ability to stretch the floor offensively. His playmaking has come around, but he's a guy defensively, Sherm, that is a real linchpin. He's a guy that can guard 5 positions. In the Denver game, he was the one started out guarding Jokic. So the Raptors really need OG back, and they'll probably take anything they can get from him.
Yeah, he's a vital part of their success. We all know that, Jonesy. And to your point about, OG, just something seems to be going on with him. It's just unfortunate. I mean, I'm trying to remember the last time that OG just played and wasn't in some way, shape, or form impacted by injury or off-court issues. It's just tough to remember. And he's battled through it. I really tip my hat to him. But this is just going to be another hurdle that he's going to have to overcome. And he's been great at doing that. You just wish he doesn't have to do that consistently. But we're talking about an injury to the shooting hand. And that's a difficult thing to deal with.
Yeah.
Playing with pain is one thing, but playing with pain potentially on the catch, on the dribble, opposing teams defensively swatting at the ball, making contact with that hand. There's a lot of issues that can happen with that. But OG's going to figure out a way to be able to be a contributing part to this team even through this injury. But, you know, we talk about the levels of scoring, and most teams have their top 2 scorers clearly defined. But when you have a third scorer that can actually be a top 2 scorer on any given night, that's a real significant piece to have in the lineup. And that's what OG brings. I think back to when Pascal was playing great and Fred was playing great, and even Gary Trent Jr. was playing great in terms of scoring the basketball. We failed to acknowledge how good OG had been playing throughout that whole stretch as the third or fourth guy on any given night. So he's valuable. And then the defensive side of the basketball, his importance goes that much higher because of his ability, as you said, to defend multiple positions. But also, when you look at games like Charlotte, where Lonzo Ball had it going or Terry Rozier had it going, you could just sick an OG at him and say, go deal with that, and he can kind of stem that tide. And the same thing when you look at the Atlanta game, you can throw him at Trae Young and just create a different kind of resistance. So he's definitely missed when he's not on the floor because of how he can impact the game on both sides.
Well, he will be missed in the next couple of games for the Raptors. And when you look at their schedule, Sherm, look, you're never supposed to win, but they've got 2 of the lesser lights in the NBA coming up in Detroit and Orlando. And then they go on the road. And they go on the road against some people that are fighting for playoffs. Cleveland slipped recently. Yeah. They've been injured. Darius Garland hasn't been able to play. I mean, they're down to their 4th string point guard. They're banged up, but they're trying to stay out of the pit, the play-in tournament. Then you go to San Antonio, who still has designs of jumping up into the play-in tournament. And then you got Phoenix and Denver, a couple of heavy hitters in the West. So just at the start of this 6-game stretch here, Sherm, it's important to try and get A, 2 at home, and B, 2 against teams that people look at the record. But then again, Sherm, we know, just ask Dwayne Casey and the Pistons, you do not play the record. There are real live bodies out there giving it to you every night.
No question about it. There are no paper wins in this league. And you just look at their game on Tuesday night against Brooklyn, a depleted team, and they went down to the wire with Brooklyn. So the Raptors are very aware of what it takes in terms of hitting the floor on any given night against any team. And those are the challenges they're going to have to overcome. You hope that a Fred will be able to play soon that can help steady that uncertainty. But there's no question they have to really answer the call over the next couple of games, regardless of who they're playing against.
Yeah, it sure is. The next game up for the Toronto Raptors is Thursday night at Scotiabank Arena. Starts at 7:30. You can see it on TSN and hear it on TSN 1050 when the Raptors take on former head coach Dwayne Casey and the Detroit Pistons. That's it for us here. Thank you for watching us here on Raptors Today.